Tip number 1. Loot all socketed and quality items. Quality items have a superior prefix in their name, and socketed items obviously show their sockets. Whenever you port to town with a full inventory of loot and identify all your loot at the Hooded One during the campaign or Doriani in your hideout to clean up, the first thing you want to do is salvage the quality gear and socketed gear that would not be upgrades or sellable at the salvage bench. Disenchant the rest. Respecking passives in the early levels is very cheap, and general gold drops should enable you to respec plenty of passive tree points. With the upcoming patch, respecking costs in the mid and end game are heavily reduced, so this should actually never be a worry. Tip number 2. While progressing through the campaign, double check all your campaign quests and make sure you complete them while you are in the zone to prevent backtracking. You can press U to open up the map and you'll see all your quests on the right side of the screen. Simply click on it to highlight the respective area. I'm not sure what this is bound to by default on console, but I'm sure you can figure it out. This tip also applies for map clearing in the endgame, as it's way better to take a bit more time to properly clear the map rather than having to backtrack to kill rares. Tip number 3. Use shield charge by equipping a shield in your second weapon slot on any class and equipping a shield charge gem during the campaign so you can move around the map faster. The skill can be cut from a level 3 uncut skill gem. Shield charge only requires 16 strength and a character level of 6, so pretty much any build can use it. Similar to shield charge, leap slam could also offer great utility, as this skill allows you to escape a situation where you're swarmed and stunned by mobs. You need to have a mace equipped to use Leap Slam. I would prioritize having access to shield charge if you're not playing a melee build. On top of this, once you obtain 60 spirit, you can also equip a blink skill gem for your weapon swap. Blink turns your dodge into a teleport every 4 seconds. The range of blink goes up with every gem level. It's a very valuable skill for mobility, so don't sleep on it if you have int. Keep in mind that Blink is a level 14 skill and requires character level 58 and 133 int, which can be difficult to obtain on a strength or dex based class. However, Blink has amazing synergy with shield charge because you can actually cancel the last part of the shield charge animation where you go kinda slow and blink straight after. On top of that, you can also link Second Wind as a support gem to Blink, so you can blink twice on the cost of having a 50% reduced cooldown recovery. If you play an int-based class, I highly advise you to use Blink, it's just insane. Simply equip the Blink skill gem and set it to only weapon set 2. Now if you want to use your Blink, you have to manually weapon swap into your second weapon set and then Blink. Use any of the skills tied to your first weapon set to automatically switch back. So why is this weapon swapping necessary? Well, that's because Blink is a spirit gem and you don't want it to replace your other important buffs. Tip number 4. Play with a loot filter. Neversink has released a simple loot filter that does not hide any items, but does highlight important drops. ARPGs are meant to make you pog over loot, and PoE 2 does not really do a good job by default. Trust me, you need and want the sounds and visual feedback of a loot filter. Hearing that tink noise is one of the biggest dopamine rushes you can get in PoE. I used Neversink's loot filter as a template to make my own. I would share it, but it's nowhere near finished, so maybe later. A link to Neversink's loot filter can be found down below. To use a loot filter, simply open the menu, click on the game tab, click on the folder icon, place the downloaded .filter file in the folder, go back in the game and make sure the filter is selected and click the refresh icon. Configuring your own loot filter is very simple, but there are plenty of guides out there already, so we won't be diving into all the details of configuration. Tip number 5. Do not be afraid to craft on your gear for upgrades. The most recent hotfix has increased loot all across the board. Do you find 2 juicy mods on a blue item? Regal it! You find a nice rare with 5 mods that could be an upgrade? Slam it with an Exalted Orb. The only common currency you might want to save up on are your armor scraps and whetstones to improve the quality of your gear. The scaling of quality only becomes impactful once you get to the endgame. Whenever you are able to progress your character at a satisfying pace, try to keep your currency for more meaningful upgrades. This ties right in with the looting and salvaging of all your bad socketed item drops, so you can always put sockets on your new gear. Tip number 6. Despite popular belief, Path of Exile 2 is not more difficult due to not having a crafting bench to tinker your gear with in the early game. You have to understand that socketing gear and using runes to cap out your resistances is basically the new crafting bench. With the availability of sockets and runes, it should be easy to cap or get close to capped resistances by the time you start approaching the endgame. Resistances cap out at 75%, and they are your absolute bread and butter when it comes to defenses. Being close to or at the resistance cap of 75%, outside of chaos resistance because it's way more difficult to cap, on top of life rolls on your gear is your best layer of defense. After that, you want to start caring about evasion, armor, and or energy shield. To sum it up, just use your runes. Time for a word from our sponsor. Drumroll. The sponsor is me. I've spent a lot of effort producing this video and I want to ask for your help. Subscribing and liking the video helps out my channel more than you'd think. You can expect a lot more Path of Exile 2 content. Alright, back to the video and thanks. Tip number 7. Every time you get a skill or support gem that can level up one of your skills, use it to gain some more power. You'll get plenty of them throughout the campaign. If you plan on playing multiple characters, don't feel the need to save them for other characters. I promise you. At some point you'll have a big surplus of skill gems, so use them. Tip number 8. When crafting a support gem, you have the box show only recommended support gems ticked on by default. Click this button to view all the available support gems for the respective skill. Some of the recommended support gems are straight up worse than the ones from the full selection, so I highly encourage you to check them out. Tip number 9. Spirit is one of the strongest resources in the game, as passive buffs and auras are very potent in Path of Exile 2. Remember, Blink is also a spirit gem. Whenever you find gear with good spirit rolls on it, make sure you stash it or try to use it to run more spirit skills. The best links for spirit gems that work on any build are Cannibalism, Herbalism and Vitality. Use all three in combination for a massive boost in survivability. Tip number 10. Attribute modifiers, dexterity, strength and intelligence are extremely valuable in PoE 2, as attribute requirements for higher end skills and gear are very steep. If you find a decent piece of gear that also has a high attribute roll that is not your main attribute, stash it as it might come in handy later. It's not necessarily the attributes themselves that give your character a lot of power, it's the options that open up when meeting requirements to use skills outside of your class archetype. And that's the essence of build making in this game. The only thing that really puts classes apart in PoE 2 are their starting place on the passive tree and available ascendancies. You should be able to use any skill on any class you desire. Tip number 11. Other than Spirit, resistances and high attribute rolls, +4 to +6 to all physical skill gems or spell skill gems is another very strong stat in the game. Either use these items if they work with your build and you can deal with the increased mana cost, or stash them to sell them away. Keep in mind that only having a juicy +2 skill gems mod does not make the item insane, but having the mod alongside of other good mods can make for a very nice item. How strong the +2 gem stat is also really differs per skill gem and build. Tip number 12. If you are not playing solo Self-Found, do not forget about trading. Every now and then it can be helpful to replace your worst piece of gear with a cheap upgrade from the trade website. This is an official GGG resource and it is linked down below. For example, what if I need a pair of boots with 20% plus cold resistance, 20% plus fire resistance, 50 plus life and 30% movement speed? Well, we hop on the trade website and use the item type to select boots. We use the section on the right to add the modifiers in, and pressing search will give us a list of items for sale with these mods. There are a lot more things you can filter on, such as damage per second, energy shield, level requirements, etc. You'll get the hang of it in no time, it's very easy to use. Tip number 13. How to price your items. It will take some time to really get a good understanding of how to price items in PoE 2. If you are playing on PC, fortunately, there is an amazing tool you can use to assist you with price checking. This tool is called Exiled Exchange and has just been released. For those of you who are familiar with PoE 1, it is a community fork of the popular Awaken trade software. Keep in mind that the tool is currently in beta and you can encounter bugs. A download link to this software can be found down below. After downloading and starting Exiled Exchange, make sure you launch Path of Exile 2 without administrator rights and that your game is set to windowed full screen, otherwise the software won't work. You can press Shift plus space to open up a settings menu, but you don't really need to configure anything as it works right out of the box. By default, you can use Ctrl plus D while hovering over almost any item to quickly do a trade search on the item while being in game. You can see how this is a lot more convenient than having to go to the trade website and entering all of the modifiers manually in order to price check something. When in doubt if an item is valuable, make sure you price check it so you don't end up scamming yourself. If no similar items show up when searching and you're the only person with that specific item, you can try to remove or lower some mods from the search to see if anything shows up and you can compare it. Unfortunately, the PoE 2 trade side API is down as I'm working on this video, so I can't really show off the quick search. However, we can still press the trade button whenever the API is down. This will take us to the trade website shown earlier with all of the corresponding mods already filtered. Tip number 14. Dodge rolling in PoE 2 has very few invincibility frames. You actually have to dodge outside of the danger rather than relying on just dodging at the right time. With a recent hotfix, they did change the character size, so we should now be able to pretty much roll out of any big pack of monsters and not be pushed against walls, rendering us completely stuck. Tip number 15. Don't be afraid to portal back to town to refill your flasks, life and mana at the well. The game is designed to do so. You can use shield charge and or blink for a quick getaway from scary monsters if you find yourself in danger without flask charges. Also make sure to use a hotkey to open portals. You can check and change the hotkey in the input tab in the settings. Once you get to maps, you fail the map if you die without completing the objective, which is almost always kill all rare and or unique monsters. There really is no shame in using portals, so just do it. It could also be good practice to already put your portal up before combat, if you are expecting incoming danger, so you can immediately port out when necessary. Tip number 16. If you are using attacks, anything that is not a spell, make sure that you have enough accuracy to be close to or at 100% chance to hit. Missing your attack is one of the worst feelings in any ARPG, and it also massively decreases your damage per second. You can check your chance to hit by going into the skill gem window and clicking the arrow on the right of the respective skill. A lot of other important information shows up here, so I encourage you to have a look at all the stats. Just like resistances, accuracy also gets a penalty once you hit cruel in the campaign and once more when starting maps. Just check your skill's accuracy every now and then and keep up with it. A very good spirit support gem you can use to increase accuracy is precision. For any non-caster build, most of your damage comes from having a good weapon and thus also good accuracy. A good rule of thumb is that you need around 1300 accuracy to be 100% accurate in the endgame. Tip number 17. If you are struggling to get currency and or good rares to upgrade your character in the campaign, there's an easy trick you can apply. You can repeatedly kill campaign bosses to farm up some gear or currency to upgrade your character if you're struggling to progress, or if you're simply broke. A great boss to farm, for example, would be the first campaign boss in Act 1 Cruel. The zone is very small and it always has the same layout, so you can get a lot of kills in. Another good campaign boss to farm would be Act 3 Doriani, by finding people for a carry in global chat. Potentially better loot per hour than the first Act 1 Cruel boss, but honestly you shouldn't be doing this for too long, it's just to get a momentary currency boost. Keep in mind that this is best done when your character is close to the level of the boss you're trying to kill. As the higher the level difference between you and the boss, the worse the loot penalty becomes, and at some point you'll just be dropping nothing, like I did in this example. Since there's no waypoint to the riverbank, you have to relog and go to normal Act 3 and take the gateway every time you want to reset the zone. To reset any zone that does have a waypoint, simply Ctrl-click on the area to open up a new one. This early farm strategy is particularly useful for the hardcore solo self-found mode. Tip number 18. If you are looking at your passive tree and realize you made a mistake or you want to respec something, try to do it as soon as possible. The gold cost of refunding passives goes up a lot with character level. It's still easy to respec, but if you can save yourself some gold pieces, do so. The gold cost has actually been reduced by about 50% overall as of the latest patch, so it shouldn't be much of a worry, but all the saved pennies add up. Tip number 19. NPC vendors in Path of Exile 2 reset every time your character gains a level. If your character is struggling, make sure to browse shops for upgrades every time you level up. And even if it's not for your personal upgrades, try to look out for that valuable +4 to +6 all skill gem stat and high spirit rolls on gear. The best pieces of gear can come straight from a vendor. Tip number 20. This might be a bit of a cliché, but comparison truly is the thief of joy. There's no rush or race, just enjoy the game at your own pace and have as much fun as you can. People often forget that this is nowhere near the full release of Path of Exile 2, and so much content is still missing. If you get stuck at any point in progression, the tips from this video hopefully suffice to help you carry on. Tip number 21. Get all the stat increases from the campaign. Most of you probably know about the plus icon on the map indicating killing that boss will give you a permanent upgrade. You get a total of 100 spirit from the campaign. The first 30 in Act 1 Freythorn, which is a single boss fight. The second 30 in Act 3 in Azak Bog, where you have to find 2 separate arenas. In one you have to light all the effigies, and in the second arena you fight the Bog Witch. And finally 40 spirit from Cruel Act 3 Azak Bog, which is the exact same fight. Alongside of the spirit upgrades, there are also permanent resistances and some quest rewards that give you flat life, etc. A list of all the important campaign quests can be found in the video description. Tip number 22. A lot of actions in PoE 2 have a control left click shortcut. Want to quickly sell gear? Control left click the items you want to sell. Want to quickly identify all of your loot at an NPC that can do so? Control left click them. The same goes for opening the disenchanting window at the respective vendor and for stashing items. Tip number 23. Don't forget to use the in-game filters when trying to find anything specific. Want to find crit nodes on the passive tree? Filter for crit. Want to see which skill gems increase your attack speed? Filter for speed in the skill gem window. Want to quickly see if an item has spirit on it? I think you get the point. Tip number 24. If you feel like you need an upgrade and the game is not offering you one, don't be afraid to spend your currency. Often you can get some very good items for just 1 or 2 exalted orbs that can last you for ages. When spending your currency on trading while you're early in the late game, try to prioritize cheap upgrades that increase your power level the most, rather than expensive fancy stuff. Tip number 25. When you're trying to upgrade your gear and you're checking your character for your total amount of resistance and stats overall, make sure you're either in your hideout or in a waystone map. Also make sure you're wielding your main weapon. Otherwise your stats will not be accurate, as you will not view your stats with the resistance penalties from cruel and maps applied. If you do this, you don't end up surprised with a missing resistance and getting one-shot by some random mob. Also, in the latest patch, GGG actually added 20% resistances, because you would lose 10% resistance upon entering tier 6 maps and another 10% resistance upon entering tier 11 maps, so that's a really big buff overall. Tip number 26. Equip charms that help you with your worst resistance. This will usually be chaos resistance during the campaign, or well, at any point in the game, so an amethyst charm will serve you well. If you somehow end up with a lot of chaos resistance and elemental resistance during your campaign playthrough, you can use either a bleed, slow, or stun charm, which are all very useful in itself. Tip number 27. There are soul core items in the game that work similar to runes. You can socket them into your gear. One soul core in particular gives you 7% chaos resistance. This is the soul core of Takati. These are going up in price daily as people realize that this is one of the best ways to cap out your chaos resistance on the character. But remember, if you can invest in a more impactful upgrade, do that first. Tip number 28. There are 3 types of defenses in the game: evasion, armor, and energy shield. Armor is rather useless in its current state, as physical damage reduction is perhaps the least important defensive stat in Path of Exile 2. However, it does really help with Sanctum, as you take way less honor damage from hits with a good armor value. Evasion is actually very good, as dodging all forms of damage is always valuable, and energy shield is simply busted with all the nodes on the passive tree and the ways you can skill it. Stacking a lot of energy shield enables Bill to run the passive node Chaos Inoculation, which makes you completely immune to one of the most dangerous types of damage in PoE 2, which is chaos damage. Tip number 29. If you're completely new to ARPGs and or have never played Path of Exile 1 before, do not hesitate to follow a build guide if you feel like you need help. You can find plenty of noob-friendly build guides for PoE 2 on the Maxroll website. I am currently working on a build guide too for my rage-stacking Bleed Big Bonks under Titan, so stay tuned for that. A link to Maxroll can be found in the video description. And lastly, tip 30. Use your gem cutter prisms. You can add quality to your skill gems by using gem cutter prisms. You need 4 of them to max out your skill gem quality to 20%. And the quality persists through gem levels. Quality on skill gems is very strong, and more often than not it offers a huge boost to the respective skill gem. To add to the list, I have several bonus tips for you guys. If you need to take a break and are scared of losing your portals due to inactivity in the zone or map, simply pause your game if you're playing solo to make sure you don't lose anything. Dinner's ready! I'm coming! Use the currency exchange whenever you want to convert any of your currency to more popular ones used for trading, such as Exalted Orbs and Divine Orbs, or whenever you need a specific type of currency, such as a particular soul core or ire to anoint your necklace. You can anoint your necklace with any non-ascendancy keystone from the passive tree, so yes, this is very strong. Don't forget about your Reforge bench. In its current state, it really doesn't do much for you and it's very restrictive. However, the biggest use for the reforging bench is currently to upgrade 3 of the same tier waystones to a higher tier. Very important. Do not forget to transmute and augment your flasks as you get flask upgrades. The modifiers on these can be super helpful. Buy higher level gems or uncut gems than the ones that are currently dropping for you to gain a big power spike. For yet another easy massive boost in power when you're starting out in the endgame, try cutting several gems into your most impactful skill and then get them to 4 links by using the cheap lesser jeweler's orbs. Now vial the gems with 4 links you just made to have about a 1 in 5 chance to get a 5th link. Normally those are made using greater jeweler's orbs, but those are pretty expensive. Note that once your gem is corrupted, it can never become a 6th link. However, you can still level them up. And now, for my final tip, some recommended in-game settings. The recommended graphic settings really depend on your rig, and if you're having performance issues, I recommend playing around with them to find the ones that offer you the most stability. Something that helps for a lot of people is changing the renderer from DirectX 12 to DirectX 11 or Vulkan. Make sure that height filtered ground items is turned on for your loot filter to actually filter things. I think auto equip is pretty useful for leveling, and gem cutting and equipping restrictions can't really hurt you too, so you don't make any mistakes. All of the interface settings are just personal preference. Feel free to copy mine. If anything, I think it's important to turn on live and mana information everywhere, so you have better visual feedback of what is going on your screen. If you want to use this, it's completely up to you. Just know about your options. Alright, that's it for my way more than 30 Path of Exile 2 tips video. Hopefully you have learned a thing or two, and thank you so much for watching. Please let me know in the comments if there's anything you're missing from this list, or if there's a topic you would have liked more information on. If you fancy stopping by my streams, I'm live almost every day on Twitch. Now go hit that like and subscribe button for more Path of Exile 2 content in the future. Till next time.